Well, good morning. I'm really excited to be sharing this message with you today, and I trust that as I do, it's going to have a great impact in your life and in mine, because I think sometimes one delivers a talk and the people that are listening think that the message is for them, but you know something, so often there are things that are said that are actually for the speaker's benefit. So I trust that this morning you're going to take some notes. We are recording this particular session, so we trust that in a few weeks' time we'll be able to post it online, and you'll be able to re-look and re-listen to this message. So for me, when I was thinking about this coming week, I began to wonder, what is it that keeps us from fulfilling the purpose for which we are called? What is it that we need to be in place in order for us to succeed or to live a significant life? And I don't know whether you've ever thought about that. You know, so often we see the things that are wrong in the world, and we are very quick to blame someone or something or a circumstance. And I was wondering, what is it really that keeps us from fulfilling the purpose that God has called us for? And as I was beginning to think about this and considering different things, for example, every one of us here this morning has a different set of circumstances that we find ourselves in. Not only physically, in other words, where you live or your family, but there are situations in your life and in mine that are different. Some of those situations or circumstances are invisible. No one else can see them. It's a kind of a situation that is occurring inside of us, and no one else is even aware. Then, of course, there are those experiences that we've had, and each of us have had different experiences. And we could quite easily tell people, you know, because of where I come from, that's why I am who I am today. And we can blame things that have happened in our life up to this point. It's very easy to do that. And we walk down the same road and we fall in the same hole and we blame somebody. And then, of course, each of us have different aspirations, different dreams, different hopes that we want to achieve. And so when we assess today's message, we are looking at this message from a very different perspective to the person sitting next to us. In fact, everybody who listens to this message is going to get a different message because they're looking at it and listening to it with a different set of circumstances, a different set of experiences, and different hopes and aspirations. And I was thinking about these three things and wondering, is that the reason? Is there something that we can blame, in other words, for the reason that we don't fulfill our purpose, or that we don't see people fulfilling our purpose, or that we feel that it's just not happening quick enough? You know, we feel like we're being held back. What is it that's stopping us? And that, through that thinking and considering this place that I see so many people finding themselves in, and myself included, I realized that there needs to be an alignment. What is this alignment? Well, as I look at you this morning, I know that you're made up of a spirit, a mind, and a body. And if you look at me today, there are four things that I'm going to be talking about which you'll be able to see right in front of you. And the one is your head, the other is your heart, the third is your hands, and the fourth are your heels. And the alignment I'm talking about is these four things. Are they in alignment? So I'm going to begin with the first part of this, and that's talking about the head. And what is the head really all about? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is it's where all the action happens. It's the mind. Okay, in this mind, the most important thing for me to do is to keep the main thing the main thing. I'm amazed at how often people know that there's an event taking place on a certain day in the future, and they can know a year in advance, but when the day arrives, suddenly there is an excuse why they can't go. And the reason for that is simply they do not keep the main thing the main thing. They lose sight of their vision. They lose sight of where they're going. They lose sight of their purpose. In other words, they are easily distracted. So the kind of things that happen in the mind affect our ability to pursue our purpose. Our mind has many sources of input, but the most powerful are the eyes, to a lesser extent the ears. But what you and I look at and what we listen to affects what we think about. So if we are looking at the head, this tool that we've got on top of our shoulders, on top of our neck, that could be one of the reasons, or one of the things that's holding us back. We are simply allowing our mind to do its own thing and not taking charge, because our spirit needs to be taking responsibility and dictating to our mind what it should be thinking about. And how do we do that? We make sure that our ears are listening to the right things, and we are looking with our eyes at the right kind of vision. In this head of ours is where we articulate the vision that we see. It's where you will sit down and you'll put together the processes. You will think about the principles, the policies, the procedures, the strategy. You begin to work everything out. This machine is what we have to use for that purpose. So when it comes to the bigger picture of our purpose, the strategy in order to fulfill that purpose is what our mind is working with. But our mind will work with whatever we give it. So again, if we're putting in the wrong stuff in our mind, it's going to be churning out the wrong information. It's just a tool that we've been given that we can be using either for or against where we're going. And so as I speak to you today, you may be aware of the kinds of things that go on in your mind, the discussion that takes place. Think about that discussion for a moment. Is that discussion aligned with your purpose? Is that discussion aligned with your vision? Is that discussion going to be working for you or against you? It's really something that we need to think about, because our mind contains the greatest nation known to man. It's called, yes, imagination. And our imagination is so powerful that it can change the world. It can bring things into existence that never before existed. That's the power of our imagination. It looks at things that are impossible and ignores the impossibility and makes it possible. That's what our imagination does. So you literally sitting here with a world-changing tool. Is it going to be used to bring about something that the world needs? Or is it going to bring about something that someone else is going to have to come to fix? It really relies on you and I to use this tool. It's not for someone else. It's not that some people have been endowed with a greater imagination than others. We all have a thing called imagination. It's just that some people use it in the right way and others abuse it. And when you abuse it, you've heard me say that before, when you abuse imagination, it is spelt W-O-R-R-Y. You worry about the things that can go wrong instead of getting excited about the things that can go right. So in this mind of ours, we not only articulate the processes that we follow, but we also make decisions. In effect, in our mind, we not only see the future, we design the future. And you can all agree with me in terms of the ability that we have to imagine and to see the unseen, the invisible with our mind. So the head is a very, very powerful part, and it's really a tool that we feed and can be used towards the vision that we've been given. The next part that I want to talk about is the heart. Now, the heart is a place where the motive lies. In other words, it's about the why you're going to do something. Some people in their heart, we hear that the root of all evil is kind of based in our heart. A man's heart is evil by nature. So we've got to be careful what we feed our heart. And I think Scripture is very clear that if you delight yourself in the Lord, He will place desires in your heart according to the plan that He has for you. But the motive for everything that you and I do lies in the heart. It's in the heart that we ask those deep questions. That question, why? Here I am. Why? What is my purpose? This is a question that's not asked by the mind. In other words, it's not a logical thing. It's something that's far deeper. It's a spiritual connection that you and I have. The asking begins in the heart. And people all over the world are desperate for an answer to this question. And you and I can share something with them that can help them to discover the purpose for which they're created. It's in the heart that we can have emotional connection, or let me use the word passion. Passion is a heart thing. There's many things that people get passionate about today. And very often it's the wrong kinds of things. I was listening to a talk not so long ago, I think by somebody here in this city, Pretoria. He's the pastor of a large church, and he was talking about the passion of the Holy Spirit that burns within us. And that passion extinguishes all other passions. In other words, it's kind of the fire that quenches other fires. When I was on a farm and a fire would get out of control, the only way that you could stop that fire was with another fire. And you'd have to start a fire ahead of the one that is coming and burn back towards that fire, and in that way you could extinguish that fire. And there are people that have passions in their heart for all kinds of things, whether it be alcohol, whether it be sexual immorality, whatever it might be. They have these other passions that take control, and that needs to be brought into submission. And so one of the passions that, one of the connections that I talk about is our spiritual connection is really a connection with the heart. And so the heart is a very, very important part of who we are, and we need to guard it in a very, very serious way. It's in our heart that desires are born. It's in our heart that desires are placed. It's in our heart that desires are born. And I look at conception. Conception is always something that occurs between two things, like the pollen and the anther and the stigma, those kind of things. I can't remember what, but the pollen has to move from the anthers to the stigma in the flower in order for pollination to happen. And when pollination occurs, a seed is born, which is going to bring life to a tree. Okay, so there's always two things together. And so what I want to try and bring across to you this morning is that there's a connection between the mind and the heart. These two have to be in agreement with one another in order for conception to take place. So you can have a desire in your heart, or you can have an idea in your head, but unless these two are connected emotionally, in other words, the idea and your passion are connected, no birth takes place. So there's many people that have lots of ideas, but those ideas that they have are not connecting with who they are, with their passion. And as a result, all they can do is talk about things, but nothing ever manifests. Nothing's birthed. There are fleeting moments where you might think that, wow, this person is going somewhere. They're going to change the world. The next time you see them, nothing's changed. Why? Because that connection did not happen. When that connection happens, there is nothing that's going to stop that process except you. No one else can stop what has been birthed, or rather conceived in a moment. They say what the mind of man can conceive and what the heart can believe, you will achieve. Those two work together. The third part that I want to discuss this morning is the hands. And it's with these hands that we literally mold the future. You know, we think something in our mind, we believe it in our heart, but we do it with our hands. It's our hands that is where the doing takes place. In other words, we master things with our hands. We talk about a master craftsman. It's somebody who is using the heart, the mind, or rather the head, the heart, and his hands all together to craft something very special. And when somebody has done something that is an art form almost, we talk about a master craftsman. And so it's your hands, it's what you do that demonstrates what you're thinking about and what you believe. So when we see the actions of somebody, which is the next key word, when we see the actions that people carry out, we can know what is it that's going on in their mind and what are they believing in their heart. Because those two things bring about the action. It's through action that we see progress. It's with this hand that we engage in partnership with people. It's when we take hands. I mean, you've heard people in South Africa so often, let's take hands. What is it saying? It's saying let's work together, let's share a common vision. Because it's in our hands that things happen. It's in our hands that we accept one another. It's in our hands that we love people. It's in our hands that we can hug others. Hands is the tangible way that we convert that invisible vision that we have in our dream and the invisible desires in our heart into a practical demonstration. It's through our hands that we meet needs. So it's through our hands things happen. We develop our purpose through our hands. Now, it's so often people think there's other things that take place, but I can assure you, your hands are a very, very important part of the alignment. So, if we think it in our mind, we believe it in our heart, and we do it with our hands, we are then beginning to see alignment. So, what is the fourth step in the process? The fourth part of the alignment is talking about our heel. Now, why I use the word heel is when you walk, the first part of the foot that hits the floor is the heel. The heel not only shows where you are going, it also reflects where you have been. I started by talking about the situations and the circumstances that we've had in our lives, the experiences, in other words, that we have had. All of those experiences develop our character. They've defined who we are right now, but they do not limit who we can be. There are certain experiences that you've had that may be preventing you from stepping into environments that you need to step into. There's things that you are avoiding today simply because you had a bad experience. I mean, South Africa as a country has a wonderful and exciting history, or a terrible history, depending on how you look at it. And you can choose whether those experiences are going to dictate how you approach the future or not. And there's certain things that are going to hold us back. So your heel is going to leave a footprint. In other words, your heel, the key word here is mark. It leaves a mark. What is a mark? A mark talks about a legacy. When you are lying in a box one day in front of a group of people who pretended to be your friend maybe, or want to just show up so that they can get the free food that's available that day, I'm not too sure what actually happens. It's amazing how some people are completely ignored by society, and when one day they have their funeral, the world rocks up. Where was I going with this? When you're lying inside that box, they're going to talk about the journey. They're going to talk about what your hands did. They're going to talk about what your heels did, because it's about your legacy. So the question is, where are your heels taking you? Are they simply taking you to work and back, to work and back, to be employed, in other words, to be abused by others? Or have you got to a point where you have moved beyond employment but to deployment? You see, your heels talk about advancing, not retreating. When you retreat, I don't know if you've ever run backwards, but when you run backwards, it's your toes that hit the ground first, not your heel. When you're running forwards, when you advance, it's your heel that goes down first. When you retreat, it's the toes. Okay? So it talks about advance. It talks about pursuit. When you're going somewhere, you're pursuing something, you're chasing after something, there's something that's drawing you, that's pulling you. You see, these are aspects that need to be in alignment. Because if where you are going is not related to where your heart and your mind is and what your hands are doing, there's misalignment. And when there's misalignment, we don't see the purpose for which we are created manifesting. And I think a lot of people find themselves in a place of misalignment instead of alignment. You see, when I talk about pursuit and advance and mark, I'm actually talking about direction. And the question to you this morning is, what direction are you moving in? Are you the kind of person that has this mentality of one day I'm going to? You know, when I'm ready, when I've got all my ducks in a row, when I've got all the money in place, when I've got all the circumstances in place, when everything is fine, when everything is perfect, then I'm going to start. If you are that kind of person, you will remain where you are. You will never move. There's no time like now. Right now you've got to make that decision. Right now you've got to make that choice. And it's when you do that you begin to see great things happening. So your head, your heart, your hands, and your heel need to be in alignment, because when they are, that's when you begin to pursue your purpose. So I'm going to just share one last thing, and that is the fifth letter. Now you probably noticed that I'm using the letters H in this particular talk. And so if our head, if our heart, if our hands, and if our heels are in alignment, the world is going to hear something. And this is what the world is going to hear. The world is going to hear your message. There's lots of people that can talk about different things, but there are very few people who have a message that they deliver. It's amazing how many motivational speakers I have, or potential motivational speakers, people who want to, they actually want the limelight. They want to be up in front. They want to be noticed. They want to be recognized. They like the applause and all these kinds of things, but they have no message. You don't need to be somebody who's charismatic. You don't need to be somebody who's wearing the best kind of clothing. You don't have to be a person that has good looks. You don't have to be a person with hair. You know, just have a message, because if you have the message, that is what people are going to hear. The next thing, the people are going to feel accepted. When you are pursuing your purpose, the whole reason that a purpose exists is because a need precedes the purpose. So if there was a need in the world today, you were created to meet a need. And it's that need that you and I created that will make people feel accepted, because there are many people right now who feel lost, who feel neglected, who feel like outcasts. And the reason they feel like that is because somebody is not pursuing the purpose for which they were called. Because when you pursue the purpose for which you are called, that is when those people who are currently in a place of need feel accepted. They begin to feel hope. They see there's actually something that's going to happen in the future that could be a change for them. And so not only do they hear the message and feel accepted, but they are going to see the proof. Your walk is going to be the evidence that you were created for a purpose. But not only that, when you begin to fulfill the purpose for which you were created, there are going to be miracles that are going to occur. And so not only is there the evidence or the proof that you provide through stepping out in faith that you were born for a purpose, but there's going to be a proof that God exists. Why? Because there are things that are going to happen that clearly were not part of your ability. And then the last letter in this section, when I say here, I'm not talking obviously what you originally thought when I said here, because most people think ear when I say here. But people hear in many different ways. Have you know, my children will tell you that my wife and I have a look that we can give that says a lot. You know, they hear exactly what we are saying without any words being spoken. Why? Because people hear in different ways. And so one of the ways that people are going to hear is not only through this, but the way we feel, what we see, and then lastly, they're going to know. Why? Because they will see that you have been deployed. I want to tell you, I'm using this word deployed. You cannot pursue a purpose with the mentality of an employee. It doesn't matter if you are employed right now. Remember, the word ploy means to use to your advantage. If you putting a ploy together, you are scheming to use other people or things for your advantage. So the word employ means that if you are employed, you are being used by somebody else for their vision, not for yours. You get the crumbs from the vision. You don't get the main thing. Okay? So you've got to be aware of the fact that purpose is about deployment. And there are so many people today that have a vision and a dream, but the vision and dream that they have is something that they are trying to fulfill in their spare time, in their part-time, when things are right. They think like an employee. In other words, they should be paid to do this thing. And I want to tell you today that when you connect with purpose, you've got to understand it requires you to be deployed. You've got to step out of your comfort zone into a place where you are absolutely and completely dependent on God in your life. You've got to be in a place where you surrender to Him. It's not something where you're not going to, in some cases, you're not going to be able to logically figure out where the next meal might come from. You're not going to maybe know where the fuel is going to come for your vehicle. I don't know. There's going to be circumstances that you face that are going to seem impossible to overcome. But as you step, you're going to begin to see God's work in your life. You're going to see the miraculous provision. You're going to become more confident. You're going to be able to step out more frequently. And as you go, eventually, you're not going to be concerned about the food and the fuel and the other things. Why? Because you know from experience that when God has called you to do something, He will provide. He'll bring the people. He'll make the provision, because that's His responsibility. So in summary this morning, the talk that talks, or rather this talk this morning, is all about the alignment. It's about getting the head, the heart, the hands, and the heels in alignment. In other words, what I think, what I believe, what I do, and where I go all need to be talking to one another. If those are misaligned, if our head says one thing, our heart believes another, our hands do something else, and our feet are going in a different direction, we are stuck. Because a person that has that circumstance remains exactly where they are. They cannot move. It's a physical impossibility. And so my perception is that many people are in a place of misalignment, and as a result cannot move. They remain stuck. It doesn't matter how big the dreams are that they think. If they believe they cannot do it, they are stuck. It doesn't matter whether they believe they can do something. If what they do is not aligned with what they believe, they are stuck. Even if they do the right things, but they do not move, they do not step forward, they are stuck. And so my message to you this morning is work on the alignment. Because if you can get your head, your thinking, your feeling, your working, and your walking together, the world will know that the need that they have will be met. People everywhere will begin to have hope once again. I trust that you're going to take this message that I have begun and work on it yourself. Think about it, dissect it, add to it, grow it, begin to live it. But most importantly, take it and share it to someone. Because if you share this message with someone else, it may just help them to unstick themselves and begin to move from employment to deployment. From being an employer to being a deployer. And I trust that the world will never be the same because you showed up. Thank you very much.